Welcome to the IJIS Institute Sounds of Safety podcast, where our community will be delving into a series of critical issues supporting the public sector mission space. In this episode, we begin a series focused on the best practices for implementing an offender or jail management system within a corrections agency. We're pleased to welcome 4 valued members from the IJIS Corrections Advisory Committee for this discussion, including Rick Davis, Lynn Ayala, Jerry Brinegar, and Chrysta Murray. These panelists explore why it is crucial to modernize offender or jail management systems to attract younger talent, catch up with other domains in terms of technology developments, and why this investment is crucial to help employees do their jobs easier. Let's hear expert opinions on these topics from Rick, Lynn, Jerry, and Chrysta as they provide their thoughts.
Good afternoon. Welcome to today's special edition podcast produced by the IJIS Institute. I'm Rick Davis, your moderator, Thought Leadership Director at my case, and former Chief Information Officer for the Virginia Department of Corrections, where I served for almost 16 years. We're here today as a panel to explore a topic that is critical to the future of corrections and for public safety. And that topic is the successful implementation of an offender management system and a jail management system for prisons and jails across the country. So join me today in welcoming 4 outstanding panelists, each bringing an extensive real-world experience leading OMS projects in a variety of correctional environments. First on our panel today, we have Lynn Ayala, Senior Business Consultant at the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. Lynn has deep expertise in business processes and system modernization efforts across one of the nation's largest correction agencies. Good afternoon, Lynn. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thank you. Thanks, Rick. I appreciate the introduction.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit more about your background working at TDCJ.
Sure. Yes. As you mentioned, I've actually been working for the Texas Department of Criminal Justice for over 40 years. It was actually the Texas Department of Corrections when I started in January of 1985. My first job was as an administrative procedures writer, which gave me an opportunity to learn a lot about how the organization works in the institutions. And we had a special project. I became a special projects person that resulted in my transfer actually to the information technology division, where I was one of 2 project managers over a multi-million-dollar project, reengineering project back in the 90s that resulted in the development of the offender management system for parolees. And I've been assigned to a number of special projects, document management system project, but have as you've mentioned, a deep knowledge of how it works on the operational side, as well as I like to say I came over to the light side when I went to work for IT, because now I see how it works on the back end and I understand how the users view those systems from the front end. And it's really important to have that experience, I think, from both sides to understand and appreciate the significance and the importance of a modern offender management system. So appreciate the opportunity to participate today.
Well, Lynn, we are glad that you are on this panel, and you are absolutely right. Having the experience really from both the business side as well as technology gives you an insight that most of us don't have. So glad to have you on our panel. Today, along with Lynn, we have Jerry Brinegar. He is the Chief Information Officer for the New Mexico Department of Corrections. Jerry brings decades of leadership in technology strategy and large-scale system deployments. I first met Jerry on a visit to New Mexico almost 10 years ago now. We were working on a prison camera project, and Jerry had a lot of experience modernizing the systems there at New Mexico. So, Jerry, talk a little bit about your working experience for the New Mexico DOC.
Thanks, Rick. Hi, I'm Jerry Brinegar. As Rick mentioned, I'm the Chief Information Officer and Director of Information Technology here at the New Mexico Corrections Department. I've been in the chief role for 6 years now. 5 years preceding that, I was the deputy chief, and I've had a number of other positions during my 18 years with corrections as well, from quality assurance to business analysis. I've done some things on the infrastructure side as well, as Rick has mentioned. And I've been in technology since the early 90s and have had just about every IT role that exists at one point or another. I also have the honor of serving in a few volunteer roles, one of which is the Corrections Advisory Committee of IJIS, which I'm a proud member of. And I'm also the secretary of the Correctional Technology Association. So I'm really excited to be part of this podcast series, and thanks for having me.
Oh, you forgot one other thing. You past president of CTA as well.
That is correct.
Glad to have you on board with us today, Jerry. Appreciate it. And we have Chrysta Murray. She is the Operational Systems Unit Director at the Vermont Department of Corrections. She is an experienced leader in operational and technical system environments. I've gotten to know Chrysta over the past couple of years. Tell us your transition over to the Vermont Department of Corrections from your previous work experience.
Thank you for having me, Rick. So I was previously in journal production, but there I automated workflows using FileMaker Pro, which is a database program, and it had its own structure and way of how it worked. It was a little antiquated. Came over to the Vermont Department of Corrections in March of 2017 as a business analyst, and that was to simply write SQL to create reports within the current offender management system. Quickly learned that in order to do that and learn the database structure, I needed to understand processes. So from there, I learned all sorts of different corrections processes. So I've never worked in a correctional facility. My specialty, I'll say, is community corrections because I've done a lot of development within our current system as developing it to work with community corrections because it was initially jail-based. So I've been in this role as a director since April of 2019. My team grew from 3 of us to now there are 7 of us. So it's been an exciting growth opportunity, and we are getting ready to do an RFP for a new corrections operations management system, which will encompass a version of an offender management system.
Well, that is terrific. I appreciate it, Chrysta. This podcast is extremely timely for that discussion then. So welcome to the panel. Glad you're with us. The discussion on implementing an offender management system is timely and important. As correctional agencies face increasing demands for transparency, efficiency, and data-driven operations, implementing an effective offender management system has become essential. But as the panel will tell you over the course of these episodes, it is no small task. A project such as this is complex, it's resource intensive, but it's mission critical. Today and in future episodes, we're going to share lessons learned from the front lines. We're going to discuss best practices and offer guidance for agencies that are preparing to undertake this critical effort. Now, as part of the Corrections Committee at the IJIS Institute, our mission as a team is to advance public sector technology through collaboration, education, and thought leadership. This podcast is part of our commitment and being trusted and practical knowledge to give it to those directly who are in charge of leading the way in corrections innovation throughout the country. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. We appreciate you all listening to this. Let's set the stage for this conversation. We'll start with the very basics. What exactly is an offender management system, or is known by the acronym an OMS? So we'll just take them in order as our introductions. Lynn, you want to first try that one?
Yes. When I think about legacy OMS systems, offender management systems, I have an analogy in mind that those legacy systems are like a building, right? You have your original building, and over the years, you make repairs to it. You might put some new paint on it, lay some new carpet. You might add some new rooms to it. Sometimes you add new buildings, but those buildings aren't necessarily connected. And over time, you don't have the ability to make those kinds of connections and integrations that are really necessary to be effective. In a legacy system, a lot of times the data is not being shared and processes don't really work as effectively as they should, because again, you don't have the ability to make those connections. A modern cloud-based system, you're not patching or band-aiding anything. You're starting over. You're able to develop a new framework, a new infrastructure where you can build those connections. And some of the tools and technologies that are available today, of course, those connections are built. And it gives us an opportunity to leverage those kinds of efficiencies to be able to share that data internally within divisions and departments within our own organizations. And it also gives us the ability to share that information across other jurisdictions in a way that these legacy systems just really weren't ever built to do that. And the time has come where, given the changes in cybersecurity needs and just the changes that are happening around us, as far as generational changes in the offender population, in the workforce, it's hard sometimes to get people to come to work when they see that you have a legacy system that is a bit antiquated. I use a bit, I'm being generous. So this provides so many opportunities on so many levels to be able to make that leap. And it really is a transformational leap to a new OMS that can provide the capability that a legacy system, you can add as many rooms as you want and paint it as many times as you want to, but you can't provide the kind of service that needs to be provided to the public, to all of the stakeholders and constituents in corrections. That's kind of how I view it, I guess, and why what we're doing is so important.
Well said, Lynn. Well said. Thank you so much. Jerry, how would you define an offender management system?
Sure. So at the macro level, the purpose of an offender management system is basically to manage all aspects and needs of an incarcerated individual while they're under our jurisdiction and custodial care. It's to do so in a manner that helps ensure the safety and security of those individuals, our staff members, and the public, and above all, provide the technical mechanism to help support staff as they prepare incarcerated individuals for their ultimate return to society. In terms of the difference between legacy systems and newer ones, in my opinion, and I think this can be attributed to earlier systems in other domains as well, is that the legacy OMS was geared towards capturing data points. It's more operational in nature. It's largely focused on security operations. Legacy systems are often difficult to understand all the various screens and locations and steps needed to complete a business process, and therefore they tend to be less functional. I'm sure we've all experienced it with an old system. You have to go to 6 different screens and press 1VX F1 or something similar to capture a data point or create a record. And because of this data dispersion across and throughout a legacy system, you may not get a very clear or complete picture of that individual. Modern offender management systems, on the other hand, build upon the mere storage of data to take those data points and records and provide information that's actionable. They provide visualization to help see patterns in the data. They can serve as small document repositories, allowing more timely access to items that used to be in paper files. They can provide timelines to give you a better overall sense of that individual's life cycle through the correctional system. They provide notification and alerts to help overloaded staff keep up. They interface with a myriad of other systems in improved ways to reduce duplicative efforts. They can help identify what programs have the highest impact on recidivism. And all of these serve to decrease the administrative burden on staff and ultimately are meant to improve our ability to focus on the individual and improve outcomes.
Well, that's very extremely comprehensive, Jerry. Excellent. Very good. Thank you. Chrysta, how would you define an OMS?
So, when I think of legacy, the system that we went from was what I call a DOS-based system. It was the black screen with the green lettering where you used all of the F keys to navigate through the system. So, moving to a new system was significantly different and was, I think, better in that it had more capability in terms of storing documents within it, having more integration with other systems. And so, as we've progressed over the past 8 years, some of the items that I've identified that are key items in which a new system, or as we develop our current system, some of the items that we have definitely found to be more beneficial are things like integration with other systems, which leads into the administrative burden that Jerry mentioned, having to enter in data that lives someplace else. It's very time consuming for staff with, staffing challenges that many agencies face. And it's duplicative, which means opens you up for error in data entry. So now you have the same data in two different systems and you don't know which is your system of record. So a new OMS, you should really define what the system of record is and bringing in data sources in which you don't have to enter in data that exists elsewhere. With that, you then can do data analytics, any sort of different analytics. But when I think of it, where it is going to be the most beneficial is around reentry, because we also do probation and parole within our Department of Corrections. So that continuity of care and information in the reentry process. So being able to look at data, both past data and the current, incarcerated individual, looking at history, identifying needs pre-reentry and post incarceration to get a better picture of someone and their needs to provide those services in the community to reduce recidivism.
It is hard to top y'all's answers because I think you have fully defined an offender management system. I know y'all always get questions from people about just the breadth of the work, whether it is in prison operations or in community corrections, about what all does get included into a comprehensive offender management system. And the only thing I would add to everybody's answers on the panel is that it really is soup to nuts, right? It's intake, classification, housing management, incidents, sentence calculation, disciplinary. I think Chrysta just mentioned that, case management, treatment, vocational jobs, education, program participation. Like, the list is almost endless about what truly can be included. And probably all of us here on this panel have had silo systems that have had to include all that information over the years and not into a single system. So I think y'all did a great job of answering that. So everybody mentioned in their answers about the traditional legacy systems that are generally in use out there in correctional agencies all across the country. How would you define the differences in those legacy systems versus the modern cloud-based systems that are on the market today? Lynn, I'll ask you that first.
It is a challenge to provide a short answer in response to that. I'd like to say that it is a thing of the past, having these standalone systems that don't share data. But again, coming from a state the size of Texas and a prison system as large as the one we have in Texas, I think of it as it's basically a large city, right? Because you have to provide everything, as you said, from soup to nuts. And the kind of functionality that can be provided, and not to repeat some of the things that have been said before, this also, a modern system helps us, it puts us in a better position to be able to implement standards. And it also helps to improve our communications, and as I mentioned earlier, with our external stakeholders. And I have been around long enough, I've seen that pendulum, as it were, swing back and forth between security and custody took primary, was uppermost. And then the pendulum would swing to treatment. Then the pendulum would swing back, go through large building projects, building programs where thousands of beds are added. And in Texas, when the agencies were merged back in the mid 90s, they merged prisons, probation, and parole. So that in itself created some interesting challenges that I think the agency has been able to work through. But the result was we, had to take three completely separate systems and merge them, at least from a data perspective and from a functionality perspective in terms of parole and prisons, into one system. A new modern system gives us the ability to, especially that space where there's connections between someone's incarcerated and someone needs to be released, and now they're in the community, and being able to share that information. And unfortunately, we have a population of people that recidivate, that do go back into prison. So being able to have access to that information from every point of contact with that individual throughout their life cycle of contact, if you will, with the criminal justice system is something that our legacy systems just can't provide that kind of functionality. It's just not built to do that. And these modern systems, you have to build that in up front. It's not something you can add later, at least not with a lot of pain and a lot of headache, huge cost, infrastructure, all kinds of things. For most jurisdictions, it's just too expensive. I'm excited about just to see the things that are coming and the kind of capability that a modern system can provide to address those issues.
Yep, very good. Jerry, with your technology background, I know you have seen it all, and I'm certainly not saying you're old. Yeah, you've seen it all, the changes in technology over the past decade. How do you see the changes from the legacy OMSs that are used out there versus the new cloud-based ones?
Yeah, and that's okay, Rick. I'll own every single wrinkle that I have. So I also don't want to be repetitive of what I said before, but I do think the big shift is from data to actionable information. So providing that context that allows you to make better decisions. I really loved Lynn's analogy on the building.
So, Chrysta, talk a little bit about the differences between the legacy systems that are used in corrections versus the new modern ones that many are cloud-based.
So I wasn't here for our old one, so I don't know what an old one looks like. But what I can speak about is what I've seen I've been to CTA, I think 3 years now, various other technology conferences, forums. And so I think, cloud based, having access to your data wherever you are, as well as your system wherever you are, of course, as long as it addresses security. But I think that to what newer staff want is they want technology. They want something that's handheld. They don't want to be writing in a paper log the same thing that they're also entering into a system. They want to be able to move around, connect with the incarcerated or the supervised individual, and actually do meaningful work and not just be a paper pusher, button pusher, etc. So I really think, and especially with the staffing issues that a lot of people are facing, you're going to get the younger crowd applying for these jobs, and they want the technology, and not have to, deal with these antiquated systems and not have to click a whole bunch of buttons. So I think really that modern system really needs to, again, collect the data, but bring the data together from various sources and really just allow staff to do the work that they applied to do, that meaningful assistance of, eliminating recidivism and just not seeing them come back into our care and custody.
I'll just add, Chrysta talked about this as well with the younger generation that, really do expect something that's easy to understand and repeatable processes.
Well, and you both make an excellent point. One of the challenges we have in corrections is staffing recruitment. And even whether it's on the IT side or in business operations, if you have these legacy systems, the younger folks that you're recruiting, they don't want to use a green screen system. They don't want to have to learn function keys. I'll never forget when I started at the Virginia Department of Corrections in 2005. We had two mainframe systems, and we had something called a VAX cluster, and it was the epitome of a green screen. And I dare say that all three of those systems really, they had very, very limited abilities to integrate to any other system out there. I dare say the legacy systems probably all have some sort of security vulnerabilities that the modern systems don't have today. And a challenge I think we all had was over on the disaster recovery side, right? I mean, it's very, very difficult to recover from these legacy systems if something were to happen. With the cloud-based systems, you just go to other regions and you just fail over, really quite seamlessly. So I think all of us really laid out some pretty good reasons why we need to be moving to the cloud. So let me ask, as a final topic for today's episode, is this: all of us on this panel believe the whole reason we're doing this podcast series is that we believe that implementing a modern offender management or jail management system isn't just a nice to have. It's absolutely critical for how correction agencies operate today. So, Lynn, let me just ask you, what would you say is your top number one reason why it's absolutely critical to do this today and not wait any longer?
Oh, sure. Yes. We need to be able to manage and provide the services that we're charged with doing, that are part of our mission statement, right? And Rick provided a lot of good details specifically about everything that's encompassed in doing that. And the public has an expectation that we're going to keep them safe. And we also have an obligation to treat offenders, to treat those that come within our custody or that we are responsible for supervising in the community. And as new treatment modalities become available, as that political pendulum, if you will, swings back and forth, as criminal justice agencies, we need to be able to be responsive in virtually real time. We can't wait. We'll deploy that new system and it'll only take 5 years, to make that change. By the time we can implement some of the legislative mandates, and I can just speak for us here in Texas, but I'm sure it happens everywhere. By the time we're able to implement some of these things that we're legislatively mandated to implement, the world's moved on. And now there are other risks, there are other challenges, there are other things that the agencies need to be able to respond to. And we don't have the capability to do that with these legacy systems. Again, the time is now because we have a multi-generational workforce. We have a multi-generational offender population. We have new security threats, both physical and cybersecurity threats from inside and outside our country, our states. Everybody's experiencing some of these same issues. This is absolutely the right time to begin having these conversations and not just talk about it, but actually, I think we're now positioned to be able to do something about it. And that's why I was excited to have a chance to participate with this group, because it really represents an accumulation of lessons learned over the years and the knowledge that you, throughout your experience, bring to the table to kind of help agencies and service providers as well understand what the needs are and help us, foster collaboration with the people that need these solutions and with the companies, the solution providers that can assist with that. And what is that old saying? If not now, when? But I think we've reached a point where almost, I don't want to say a crisis point, but pretty close to it. We can't continue to try to band-aid the systems, these legacy systems that we have in place right now, because they just won't get the job done. And we can't hire and retain people that have the kind of skills that we need on a green screen.
Yeah, Lynn, you're right on the money about that. We've kicked this can down the road long enough, right? I mean, we can't kick it down the road any further. So, the time is now. Jerry, you know what a tough process this is, implementing offender management system. What do you believe is the number one reason that states and jails need to look at modernizing their system?
Well, Rick, you mentioned it. It's a matter of criticality. It is critical that we improve. We need better outcomes. Our administrations, our legislative bodies, and the public are expecting them. Our systems or secure systems are needed that can help us accomplish this, can help us provide that actionable information that drive decisions that lead to better outcomes. And the biggest reason I wanted to be a part of this podcast is that, along with my esteemed counterparts, I'd like to potentially help those out there that are going through this modernization effort now. I mentioned I started with corrections 18 years ago and originally was hired as a project manager to help modernize our offender management system. I've been through a number of different iterations of those modernization efforts over the years, some successful, others not so much. So my hope is for those out there going through this now is to be able to provide an opportunity to learn from this podcast based on our collective past experiences and our journeys. And I use that word journey purposefully. For many of us, Rick, and you mentioned this at the very beginning, the modernization of an OMS will be, for many of us, the largest, most complex business effort we'll ever be a part of. Doing it right takes time. It takes commitment, and it certainly takes perseverance. So the journey for improvement is shorter for some of us and longer for others, but it's a journey nonetheless. And we'll get into this as we move forward, but it's perhaps one that should never really end.
Jerry, your description of the OMS implementation being a journey is just absolutely spot on. And it's a journey that we're going to help with this panel here, try to make it easier for others that are ready to embark. So, Chrysta, you're about ready to start your journey there in Vermont with the team. So tell everybody why you believe it's the most important thing to go ahead and modernize the offender management system now.
Well, yes, Jerry hit the nail on the head with the complexity of the project that we are about to embark on. I think that the longer you wait, the further behind you're going to get. And of course, that also means the more money it's going to cost. The longer you wait, the more functionality that is going to be available. And with that additional functionality, while it's going to be great, that's also going to be significant change for your staff. And so, in moving to the new system, the sooner the better, only because then you've got a system in place that you can then capitalize on the changes that that system is rolling out. I think the other thing too, why it is important is because the corrections and the criminal justice system as a whole has been moving from that punitive mindset to rehabilitative mindset, which is requiring our offender management systems and really all correctional systems to broaden their scope and provide more functionality than before. Probably 10 years ago, you needed disciplinary reports, property, just kind of simple modules for jail management or offender management system. But now you're getting into case management and looking at their mental health and substance abuse and all of these things that now newer systems need to have. And with having that, it's not cheap for a company to develop that. It's a lot more programming, it's a lot more data and functionality. And it's really just to improve that efficiency, you need that modern system. So I'm doing this because it will be a good learning experience as I move through this process. And really, I mean, my entire career, even before this, has been process improvement. So going through the process improvement of a modern offender management system is critical just so you can continue to function in modern society and modern technology.
The only thing I would add, each one of you did a terrific job of answering all these questions today. And the only other thing I would add is that I feel like now my working career is becoming very close to 40 years. I see every industry has been modernized in terms of their technology, their solutions, the reporting, the analytics. But for some reason, it seems like we in society keep pushing back on corrections and jails, and we keep expecting all of us to be able to have better outcomes using technology that is, in many cases, well over 30 years old. I think it's time. I think it's important that we all advocate and advocate strongly that there must be an investment in both corrections and jails and probation and parole to be able to help us to do our jobs better to solve all the problems that our panelists have all discussed today. So thank you all very much. And I'll just end today's episode with this, is that As we've explored in today's episode, our panel did an awesome job of discussing how a modern offender management system is much more than just upgrading some software that's in use today. It's about laying that foundation for a safer, more efficient, and more accountable corrections environment. In our next episode, we're going to discuss and we'll dive into the growing need for an updated OMS, the risk of holding on to legacy platforms, and how modern systems can truly drive meaningful change, from reducing manual workloads to delivering critical data to those decision makers. Join us as we take a closer look at how and why now is the time for change. On behalf of Lynn, Jerry, Chrysta, myself, thank you all for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of the Sounds of Safety podcast. Be sure to stay connected with the IJIS Institute on LinkedIn and X, and don't forget to subscribe on Apple Music, Spotify, or your preferred podcast platform to catch future episodes. From cybersecurity to artificial intelligence and deep dives into critical national data sharing initiatives, the Sounds of Safety podcast has you covered. Until next time.